This is Talk Business and Politics with Roby Brock.
And welcome to today's Talk Business and Politics. I'm Roby Brock. We are glad to have you with us. We start off today with Arkansas Attorney General Leslie Rutledge. She has been hopping between the state capitol and counties all around the state. Welcome to the program. Good
Thank you,
with
Roby.
us.
Glad to be on with you.
Let's start up at the Capitol real quick, and then I want to transition into a big week for you coming up with consumer protection. But let's start at the Capitol first. What's your sense of how the session's been going up there?
I think it's going well. You know, anytime that legislators are in session, we're tracking, reading every single one of the bills. I don't have the luxury of just focusing on a handful of them, that we read all of them and advise them. We're seeing the governor's agenda get pushed through, and we'll see what they do on highway funding. I don't have a crystal ball, so I can't tell you what they're going to do on highway funding.
I got a crystal ball. The votes are there. It's going to pass. So take that one to the bank.
All right.
All right.
Good.
There's one potential constitutional amendment that may get referred from the legislature. I hear it's a little bit of an odds-on favorite. Would change the whole ballot initiative process to put the person or the group that has to okay a ballot measure for to go out and collect signatures to the State Board of Election Commissioners, which would be out of your office.
That's right. And
are you for that?
I am. This is some legislation that I worked very closely with Senator Pitch and others on to make sure, as we saw during this last election cycle, but we've seen for years, Roby, that when Arkansans want to amend the state constitution, oftentimes perhaps something will be okayed by my office, by the Attorney General's office, and then they'll go get their signatures, and then it'll be challenged in courts. And the Supreme Court at the 11th hour would come and knock that off the ballot. Perhaps they might keep it on the ballot, but what Arkansans need are the certainty that if something is on the ballot, that is an issue that they will be voting on. And these people, that petitioners and others who want to change the state constitution, they spend millions of dollars. Yep. And they spend millions of man hours going out and collecting those signatures. And so we want to make sure there's a fairness and certainty in the process. So I worked very closely to make sure that, yes, we adhere to the state constitution, which is the requirements that we've now, that have been passed out of both houses individually, and so they'll go to the other house now.
And we'll see where that one gets. And it also moves up those deadlines for filing legal challenges, which would, I think, be pretty helpful.
Yes, and so we have the January 15th deadline to file the petitions, the April 15th deadline, I believe, to have the challenges, and that way the Supreme Court will make a decision as we go into the summer of an election year to know whether or not something's going to be on the ballot. Again, it's about fairness and certainty, and I think that's very important, and transparency.
Yeah, hopefully they'll make that. All right, let's shift gears. Let's talk about National Consumer Protection Week is coming up. It is a huge component of what the Arkansas Attorney General's office does in terms of consumer protection. Let's begin first with automotive scams. A lot of this happens. There used to be a lot of complaints, there may still be, over particular car dealerships, but even with this rise of social media and things like Craigslist and whatnot, it seems like there are more auto scams than there used to be. What are you seeing in your office?
That's probably, we have issues that are the number one gripe that we get in the office with regard to robocalls, but the number one actual complaints filled out by Arkansans have to do with automobiles, and it's when they purchase an automobile and perhaps it's a bad used car dealer. Not every used car dealer is bad, just like not every lawyer is bad, and we don't all deserve the jokes. But so when there are bad businesses and perhaps they're selling cars without proper title, they're selling them deceptive trade practices where they're saying it has something that it doesn't, that's when Arkansans get taken advantage of. For most Arkansans, having a vehicle to get to and from work, to take their kids to school, to see family members go to hospital visits, we want to make sure that Arkansans have a good, reliable vehicle. Again, we see bad actors that take advantage of folks.
And you mentioned robocalls earlier. I know I get my fair share of them. We do some robocalls. We follow the letter of the law when we do our polling that goes out there. There is some legislation that's working its way through to potentially address that. But what do you see in your office in terms of robocalls? Has there been a spike in complaints on this?
Well, that's the number one gripe I get. Doesn't matter which one of the 75 counties I go to, that is the number one complaint I get. It's about these unsolicited, unwanted phone calls. And I tell people, I know you've signed up for the do not call list. That has to do with legitimate businesses. So a business, whether it's polling or wanting to sell you something, legitimate business will adhere to that. The people we're talking about are criminals. They are con artists, oftentimes from other countries, who are making these calls. What I have done is put pressure on the Federal Communication Commission to relax the rules on our phone companies. Our phone companies have the technology and the power to shut down a phone call when they see that the caller ID's been tricked. So a lot of your robocalls, just like many of your viewers, it'll show up as a local number, 501-479-870. So they answer it because they believe that it's someone they know or someone in their neighborhood. Unfortunately, as soon as they answer it, they realize immediately this is a con artist or a robocall. And so what I have done is put pressure on the FCC. Now we've got to put pressure on our service providers to shut down those calls. If you see, if the caller ID, if someone's changed the caller ID, to me that ought to be an automatic.
Yeah.
That is someone who does not have good intentions.
What's been the response from the FCC to that request?
Well, the FCC has relaxed the rules, but now we need to have more enforcement. And again, we've got to put the impetus back on our service providers. They hold the keys to the kingdom of shutting down these robocalls. Yes, we're going to go after the bad actors, but it's very difficult. And the easiest way to shut these down, to stop the 15, 20 phone calls a day that you may be getting, is for our service providers to say, if someone alters the caller ID, so if it originates in one place, they've changed the caller ID before it gets to you, we're going to shut that down.
Yep.
Certainly there's extenuating circumstances of domestic violence shelters and other circumstances where we do need the caller ID to be unknown. However, what we're talking about are the constant phone calls people are getting, and I am determined
to get 6
to
or
get
8
these
a day. So
minimum.
Financial scams, real estate scams, something else that we see a lot of. These aren't. These can come from a variety of different sources as well. They can come from letters in the mail. They can come from things through social media, particularly email. So, tell me what shimming, skimming, and spoofing is.
So spoofing is what we just talked about with regard to the caller ID, where they spoof and trick the caller ID to show a number that's not the actual number it's calling from. The shimming and skimming, which can be fun to say, I understand. So skimming has to do with the stripe on the back of your credit card. And so they'll put something perhaps in a gas pump that's in a remote area or in an ATM in a remote area, and they will steal the information off that little black strip on your credit card. Well, now credit cards have the chip readers on them. That's called shimming. So we have skimming, which is stealing the information off the black strip, and shimming, which is stealing the information off the chip reader. All this to say, probably the most important thing I can convey to Arkansans this week during National Consumer Protection Week, a couple of things. Government is not going to call you and ask you and demand payment over the phone right then. So as we're getting ready for tax season, calls claiming to be from the IRS, those are scam phone calls. Individuals claiming to be the sheriff's department, they're going to come arrest you, or that your kids, grandkids in jail, that is a scam phone call. However, do not give out personal financial information. So all this skimming, shimming, everything that we're talking about, the most prevalent thing that we see are when people give out their bank account numbers, their social security numbers, because they believe that the IRS is in fact calling, or they believe that the IRS is in fact sending them an email when they're not.
All of this criminal activity means that you have job security as Attorney General of the state of Arkansas.
Well, I would love nothing more than to say that we have taken care of all these bad actors.
Yep.
But unfortunately, it's prevalent. Crimes hurting Arkansans, taking their hard-earned money, and particularly attacking our senior citizens. Calling them on the phone and making them believe that they owe money or that money is going to good when it's not.
Yeah. Arkansas Attorney General Leslie Rutledge, is always good to be with you.
Thank you,
Thank you so much. All right, when we come back, we're going to talk highways, bankruptcy, food, the stock market, and more politics. Stick around.